What if everything we knew about Harry Potter took a completely different turn? What if the most unlikely romance in the wizarding world actually happened? Today, we're diving into one of the most fascinating alternate timelines in Harry Potter history. What if Hermione Granger, the brightest witch of her age, and Draco Malfoy, the Slytherin prince himself, actually fell in love with each other? This isn't just about romance. This is about how one relationship could completely reshape the entire wizarding war, change the fates of countless characters, and potentially alter the very outcome of the battle against Voldemort himself. Before we begin, let's establish something important. In the original timeline, Hermione and Draco were bitter enemies. From their very first year at Hogwarts, Draco made it abundantly clear what he thought of Muggleborns. He called Hermione the most vile slur in the wizarding world. He mocked her intelligence, her appearance, her dedication to her studies. He cheered when she was petrified by the basilisk. He seemed to take genuine pleasure in her pain and fear. And Hermione? She punched him in the face in their third year. She was never afraid to stand up to him, to challenge his prejudices, to call out his cowardice and cruelty. These two seemed destined to be enemies forever. But what if something changed? What if beneath all that hatred and all that venom, something else was brewing? To understand how this could happen, we need to find the perfect divergence point. The moment where our alternate timeline splits from the original. And after analyzing every interaction between these two characters, I believe the perfect moment comes at the beginning of their 6th year. Here's why. By 6th year, Draco is no longer the same arrogant boy he once was. He's been given an impossible task by Voldemort. He's been ordered to kill Albus Dumbledore, and he knows that if he fails, Voldemort will murder his entire family. For the first time in his life, Draco Malfoy is terrified. The weight of the world is on his 16-year-old shoulders, and he's completely alone. Meanwhile, Hermione is also changing. She's more mature, more confident, more aware of the complexities of the world. She's seen that not everything is black and white. She's learning that people are complicated, that they can be products of their environment, that sometimes good people do bad things and bad people can be redeemed. She's developing the emotional intelligence and empathy that will serve her so well in the years to come. So what happens in our alternate timeline? Let's find out. It starts on a cold September evening. Hermione is in the library, long after most students have gone to bed. She's researching advanced defensive spells, trying to prepare herself and her friends for the war she knows is coming. She's exhausted. Her eyes are tired from reading by wandlight, but she pushes on because that's what Hermione does. She's so absorbed in her research that she doesn't notice she's not alone anymore. Not until she hears it. A sound that doesn't belong in the peaceful silence of the library. Someone is crying. Hermione's first instinct is to leave. It's clearly someone who wants privacy. But curiosity has always been her weakness, and concern for others has always been her strength. She follows the sound, winding through the towering bookshelves until she finds him. Draco Malfoy is sitting on the floor in the darkest corner of the library, his back against the wall, his face buried in his hands. His shoulders are shaking. He looks nothing like the arrogant, sneering boy she's known for 5 years. He looks broken. For a moment, Hermione just stands there, frozen. Every instinct tells her to walk away. This is Draco Malfoy. He's made her life miserable for years. He's called her mudblood more times than she can count. He's mocked her, belittled her, tried to get Hagrid fired, wanted her dead when she was petrified. She should leave. She should let him suffer. But she can't, because despite everything, Hermione Granger has a good heart. She sees someone in pain, and she can't walk away. She approaches slowly, cautiously. She's not stupid. She keeps her wand in her hand, ready for an attack or a cruel comment. When she's close enough, she speaks softly. "Are you all right?" It's possibly the most ridiculous question she's ever asked because clearly he's not all right, but she doesn't know what else to say. Draco's head snaps up. His eyes are red and swollen. For a moment, pure panic flashes across his face. He scrambles to his feet, wiping at his eyes furiously, trying to compose himself. But it's too late. She's already seen him at his most vulnerable. "What do you want, Granger?" His voice is harsh, defensive, but it lacks its usual venom. He sounds tired, defeated. Hermione should feel satisfied. She's seen the great Draco Malfoy brought low, but instead she just feels sad. "I heard someone crying," she says simply. "I wanted to make sure they were okay." Draco laughs bitterly. "Well, as you can see, I'm perfectly fine. Now leave me alone." He turns away from her, but not before she sees his mask slip again. She sees fear in his eyes, real, genuine terror. In the original timeline, Hermione would have left. She would have mentioned it to Harry and Ron. They would have been suspicious, and eventually they would have discovered Draco's plot to help Death Eaters into the castle. But in this timeline, something different happens. Hermione makes a choice. She sits down on the floor, right there in the library. Draco stares at her like she's lost her mind. "What are you doing?" "Get out of here." "No," Hermione says calmly. "You're clearly not fine. And despite our history, I'm not heartless enough to leave someone alone when they're this upset." Draco is stunned into silence. He doesn't know how to process this. Hermione Granger, the girl he's tormented for years, is offering him kindness. It doesn't make sense. It has to be a trick. She must want something. But when he looks at her face, he doesn't see manipulation or mockery. He sees genuine concern, and that terrifies him more than anything else, because it means she's being real with him, and he doesn't know how to handle that. They sit in silence for a long moment. Hermione doesn't push. She just waits. And eventually, Draco's exhaustion wins out over his pride. "You don't understand," he says quietly. "You can't understand." "Try me," Hermione replies. "I might surprise you." And so Draco talks. He doesn't tell her everything. He's not stupid enough to reveal Voldemort's plan, but he tells her enough. He tells her about the pressure from his family, about the expectations placed on him since birth, about how he was raised to believe certain things, to hate certain people, and how he never questioned any of it until it was too late. He tells her how scared he is, how he's in over his head, how he's made choices he can't take back, and now he's trapped. He doesn't say he's a Death Eater. He doesn't mention the dark mark burning on his arm. But Hermione is brilliant. She reads between the lines. She understands what he's not saying, and she's horrified. But she's also intrigued, because this isn't the Draco she thought she knew. This is someone complicated, someone trapped, someone who might be redeemable. When he's done talking, Hermione doesn't immediately respond. She thinks carefully about her words. "You're right," she finally says. "I don't understand what it's like to grow up in your world, with your family's expectations. But I do understand feeling trapped. I understand being terrified of what's coming. I understand pressure and fear and not knowing if you're strong enough for what's ahead." Draco looks at her, really looks at her, for maybe the first time ever. "You're the bravest person I know," he says, and it sounds like an accusation. "You're not afraid of anything." Hermione laughs, but it's not a happy sound. "That's not true at all. I'm afraid constantly. I'm afraid for my parents. I'm afraid for Harry and Ron. I'm afraid of Voldemort and what he'll do to people like me when he takes over. I'm afraid I'm not smart enough or strong enough or prepared enough for what's coming." Fear doesn't make you weak, Draco. It makes you human. This conversation, this moment of unexpected vulnerability and honesty, changes something fundamental between them. They don't suddenly become friends. They don't fall in love that night. But a seed has been planted. A tiny crack in the wall of hatred that's existed between them for so long. Over the following weeks, they keep running into each other. At first, it seems like coincidence. They're both in the library late at night. They both happen to be walking alone in certain corridors, but eventually it becomes clear that they're seeking each other out. Neither of them will admit it. They make excuses. Draco tells himself he's just making sure Granger doesn't tell anyone what she saw. Hermione tells herself she's keeping an eye on him because she suspects he's up to something dangerous. But the truth is simpler and more complicated than that. They're drawn to each other because they've seen past each other's masks. Their conversations are strange and stilted at first. They argue about everything, about politics, about blood status, about the war. Hermione challenges every prejudiced thing Draco says, and to his own surprise, he finds himself listening. He finds himself questioning beliefs he's held his entire life. Because Hermione doesn't just yell at him or call him names. She presents logical arguments. She asks him questions he can't answer. She forces him to think. "Why do you believe Muggle-borns are inferior?" she asks him one night. He opens his mouth to give the standard pureblood answer, but then he stops. Because he's realized he doesn't actually have a good reason. "Because that's what I was taught," he finally admits. "But you're clearly not inferior. You're the smartest person in our year. Probably the smartest person in the whole school. So either my entire worldview is wrong, or you're some kind of impossible exception. And I'm starting to think it's the former." This admission costs him something. Hermione can see it on his face. He's dismantling his entire identity, questioning everything his family ever told him, and it's painful. But he's doing it, and that matters. Meanwhile, Hermione is also changing. She's seeing Draco as a complete person, not just the one-dimensional bully she's always thought he was. She's seeing the pressure he's under, the impossible situation he's in, the fear he lives with every day. She's seeing that he's a product of his environment, and that he's trying, in his own stumbling way, to be better. She still doesn't trust him completely. She's not naive. She knows he's hiding something big, something dangerous. She knows he's involved with the Death Eaters somehow, but she also believes that people can change. She believes in redemption, and she sees potential in Draco that maybe no one else ever has. But here's where things get really complicated. Because feelings start to develop, it happens slowly, so slowly that neither of them notices at first. It starts with grudging respect. Then it becomes something like friendship, though neither would ever use that word. And then, without either of them meaning for it to happen, it becomes something more. For Hermione, it happens the night she finds Draco in the bathroom, bleeding and broken after his duel with Harry. In the original timeline, Harry was the one who found him. But in this timeline, Hermione gets there first. She hears the commotion and arrives just as Harry is fleeing the scene. She finds Draco lying in a pool of water and blood, his white shirt soaked red, barely conscious. She doesn't think. She doesn't hesitate. She drops to her knees beside him and starts casting healing spells. Draco's eyes flutter open, and when he sees her, he tries to smile. "Of course it's you," he whispers. "Always you." Then he passes out. Hermione saves his life that night. She heals the worst of the wounds from the Sectum Sempra curse. She levitates him to the hospital wing and makes Madame Pomfrey promise not to report the incident to Snape or Dumbledore. She sits by his bedside all night, watching him sleep, watching his chest rise and fall, and realizes with a jolt of terror that she cares about him. Really cares about him. That if he had died, something inside her would have broken. For Draco, the realization comes differently. It happens during one of their late-night conversations in the library. Hermione is arguing passionately about something, her eyes bright with conviction, her hands moving as she talks. And Draco finds himself thinking that she's beautiful. Not in spite of her passion and intelligence, but because of it. He thinks about how brave she is, how kind she's been to him despite everything, how she makes him want to be a better person. And he realizes he's falling in love with her. The realization terrifies him. Because loving Hermione Granger is impossible. She's Muggle-born. His parents would disown him. Voldemort would kill them both. His entire world would come crashing down. And more than that, she's Harry Potter's best friend. She's everything Draco is supposed to hate. Loving her is a betrayal of everything he's ever been taught. But he can't stop himself. And the worst part? He thinks maybe she might feel the same way. The first time they kiss, it's an accident. They're arguing in an empty classroom. Hermione is telling Draco that he needs to go to Dumbledore, that he needs to ask for help with whatever impossible task Voldemort has given him. Draco is insisting that it's too late, that there's no way out, that she doesn't understand what's at stake. They're standing close, their voices raised, and then suddenly they're not yelling anymore. They're just staring at each other. And then, without either of them deciding to do it, they're kissing. It's not a gentle kiss. It's desperate and fierce and complicated. It tastes like tears and fear and something that might be hope. When they finally pull apart, they're both shaking. "We can't do this," Draco says. "You're Muggle-born. I'm a Death Eater. This is impossible." "I know," Hermione whispers. But she kisses him again anyway. Because sometimes the heart wants what it wants, logic be damned. And because in the midst of a war, in the face of darkness and death, they've found something precious and unexpected. They've found each other, but loving each other doesn't make everything else go away. In fact, it makes everything infinitely more complicated. Because Draco still has his mission. He still has to find a way to get Death Eaters into Hogwarts. He still has to kill Dumbledore or watch his family die. And Hermione knows something is wrong. She knows Draco is keeping dangerous secrets. She's caught between her loyalty to Harry and her growing love for Draco. She's lying to her best friends for the first time in her life. Sneaking around, hiding this relationship that she knows they would never understand or accept. Harry and Ron notice that something is off with Hermione. She's distracted. She disappears for hours at a time. She's defensive when they ask where she's been. Harry is convinced she's just stressed about exams or worried about the war. But Ron suspects something else. He watches her carefully, and one night he follows her. He sees her meet Draco in a secluded corridor. He sees them kiss. And he's absolutely furious. Ron confronts Hermione the next day. The argument is explosive. He calls her a traitor. He says she's betraying Harry. betraying their friendship, betraying everything they stand for. "How can you be with him?" Ron shouts. "He's a Death Eater, Hermione. He called you mudblood. He's tried to get us killed." Hermione tries to explain. She tries to tell Ron that Draco is changing, that he's trapped, that there's more to the situation than Ron understands. But Ron won't hear it. He's hurt and angry, and he can't see past his prejudice. The friendship between Hermione and Ron shatters that day. Ron goes to Harry and tells him everything. Harry is stunned. At first, he doesn't want to believe it, but then he thinks about all of Hermione's suspicious behavior, and it makes sense. Harry's reaction is more measured than Ron's, but he's deeply concerned. He's worried that Draco is manipulating Hermione, using her feelings to get close to them, to gather information for Voldemort. He's worried that his best friend is in danger. Harry confronts Hermione privately. The conversation is painful for both of them. "I trust you," Harry says quietly, "but I don't trust him. I think he's using you, Hermione. I think this is all part of some plan." Hermione shakes her head. "You're wrong. He's not like that. Not anymore. He's changing, Harry. I've seen it." Harry looks at her sadly. "I hope you're right. But if you're wrong, if he betrays you, betrays us, it could cost everything. Are you willing to risk that?" The question haunts Hermione, because the truth is she's not sure. She believes Draco is changing. She believes his feelings for her are real. But she also knows he's keeping secrets. She knows there's a part of his life he won't let her see, and she's terrified of what it might be. The tension comes to a head the night Draco finally succeeds in repairing the vanishing cabinet. The night Death Eaters pour into Hogwarts. But in this timeline, things happen differently. Because Hermione knows something is going to happen that night. She doesn't know what, but she's seen the fear in Draco's eyes, the desperation. She follows him to the room of requirement. She sees him open the vanishing cabinet. She sees Death Eaters step through. And she understands, finally, the full scope of what he's done. She sees Bellatrix Lestrange, the woman who will one day torture her within an inch of her life. She sees Fenrir Greyback, the werewolf who delights in attacking children. She sees death and destruction walking through the doors, and she knows it's Draco who let them in. She should raise the alarm. She should run to find Harry or McGonagall or Dumbledore. She should stop this. But she's frozen, paralyzed by shock and betrayal. Draco sees her standing there, and his face goes white. For a moment, they just stare at each other. Hermione can see everything in his eyes. The guilt, the shame, the fear, the plea for understanding. But before either of them can speak, Bellatrix notices Hermione. "Well, well, well," Bellatrix cackles. "What do we have here? A little mudblood spy? Draco, darling, you've caught us an audience. Shall we make sure she doesn't interrupt our fun?" What happens next changes everything. In the original timeline, Draco walked away from his Death Eater aunt and went to fulfill his mission. But in this timeline, he makes a different choice. When Bellatrix raises her wand toward Hermione, Draco steps between them. "No," he says. His voice is shaking, but it's firm. "Leave her alone." Bellatrix laughs. "Don't tell me you've gone soft, little dragon. She's just a mudblood. She's nothing." Draco raises his own wand, pointing it at his aunt. "I said no." The room of requirement goes completely silent. Every Death Eater is staring at Draco like he's lost his mind. Maybe he has, because he's just signed his own death warrant, and he knows it. But he doesn't care. He won't let them hurt Hermione, not even to save himself. Bellatrix's expression turns cold and deadly. "You're betraying your blood, betraying your family, betraying the Dark Lord himself. For this filth?" Draco doesn't lower his wand. "Yes," he says simply. "For her." What follows is chaos. Spells start flying. Hermione snaps out of her shock and starts fighting back. She and Draco fight side by side against the Death Eaters. They're outnumbered and outmatched, but they're fighting for their lives. Hermione casts the spell that sends out an alarm through the castle. Within moments, members of the Order of the Phoenix and Dumbledore's army are converging on the room of requirement. Harry arrives to find his best friend fighting alongside Draco Malfoy against Death Eaters. He can't process what he's seeing, but he doesn't have time to think about it. He joins the fight. The battle is brutal. The corridors of Hogwarts become a war zone. Students are evacuated. Teachers are fighting for their lives. And in the midst of it all, Draco Malfoy has switched sides. He's fighting against the Death Eaters, against his own aunt, against everything he was raised to believe in. He does it for Hermione. But as the battle rages, he realizes he's also doing it for himself, because he doesn't want to be that person anymore. He doesn't want to be the boy who lets evil into the castle. He wants to be someone Hermione can be proud of. Someone he can be proud of, but the night still ends in tragedy, because Dumbledore still dies. Not at Draco's hand, but at Snape's, just like in the original timeline. The difference is that Draco is there when it happens. He sees Snape kill the headmaster. He sees the green light of the killing curse. And he understands that Snape has done what Draco couldn't. Snape has completed Draco's mission. Snape has saved the Malfoy family from Voldemort's wrath. But the cost is Dumbledore's life. In the aftermath of that terrible night, Draco's world falls apart. His family disowns him. His mother sends him a letter saying he's no longer her son. His father, from his cell in Azkaban, declares Draco a blood traitor. The Death Eaters want him dead for his betrayal. The Order of the Phoenix doesn't trust him because of what he's done, and the Ministry wants to arrest him for his role in the attack on Hogwarts. He's alone. He has nothing, except Hermione. She stands by him even when everyone else wants him gone. She vouches for him to the Order. She argues his case, insisting that he changed sides, that he fought against the Death Eaters, that he saved her life. She fights for him when no one else will, and slowly, grudgingly, some people start to listen. Harry vouches for Draco too, though it clearly costs him something to do it. He tells the Order what he saw. Draco fighting against his own family. Draco protecting Hermione. Draco choosing the right side when it mattered most, but Ron refuses to forgive. He won't even look at Hermione. Their friendship, one of the most important in the entire series, is broken. Maybe irreparably. And that breaks Hermione's heart. She's lost one of her best friends because of her choice to love Draco. She wonders sometimes if it was worth it. If loving one person is worth losing another. The summer after Dumbledore's death is strange and tense. Draco can't go home. He has no home to go to. The Order arranges for him to stay at Grimmauld Place under constant guard. They don't trust him not to run back to Voldemort. They don't trust him not to betray them all. Only Hermione and, surprisingly, Remus Lupin seem to believe he's genuinely changed. Hermione visits him whenever she can, though she has to be careful. She's still pretending to be at her parents' house, not wanting to worry them about the danger she's in. She and Draco spend long hours talking, working through everything that's happened, dealing with the guilt and trauma and fear. Draco has nightmares every night. He dreams about the Death Eaters he led into Hogwarts, about the people who were hurt because of his actions, about Dumbledore's death. He wakes up screaming, convinced that Voldemort has found him, that he's going to kill everyone Draco cares about. Hermione helps him through it. She holds him when he wakes from nightmares. She reminds him that he made the right choice in the end, that he turned away from darkness, that he's not the same person he was. Slowly, painfully, Draco starts to believe her. He starts to forgive himself, and he becomes determined to help in the fight against Voldemort, to atone for what he's done. When Harry makes the decision to hunt Horcruxes, everything changes again. Harry wants to go alone, or just with Ron. He doesn't want to put anyone else in danger. But Hermione insists on coming, just like in the original timeline. And this time, Draco insists on coming too. Harry is extremely resistant to this idea. He doesn't want Draco anywhere near the Horcrux hunt. He doesn't trust him with that kind of information. But Hermione argues that Draco can help. He knows things about dark magic that they don't. He understands how Voldemort thinks. He has information about Death Eater tactics and locations. And most importantly, he's proven himself. He's already sacrificed everything to fight against Voldemort. Harry finally, reluctantly agrees. But he makes it clear that if Draco betrays them, if he gives them even the slightest reason to doubt him, Harry won't hesitate to do what needs to be done. So the hunt for Horcruxes begins with a different group than in the original timeline. Harry, Hermione, and Draco. Ron is there too, though he barely speaks to Hermione and completely ignores Draco. The tension in the group is thick enough to cut with a knife. But they push forward because they have to, because the fate of the wizarding world depends on them destroying these pieces of Voldemort's soul. The hunt is brutal. They're cold, hungry, and constantly on the run. They nearly die more times than they can count. The Locket Horcrux affects all of them, but it affects Ron and Draco worst of all. It whispers their deepest fears and insecurities. For Ron, it whispers that Hermione never loved him, that she chose Draco because Ron isn't good enough, that he's always been second best to Harry, and now he's second best to a Death Eater. The locket shows him visions of Hermione and Draco together, mocks him for his jealousy and inadequacy. It breaks something inside Ron, and one night he leaves. Just like in the original timeline, he abandons them. But this time his leaving is even more bitter. He says terrible things to Hermione before he goes. He tells her she's a traitor, that she's betrayed everything they stood for, that he hopes she's happy with her Death Eater boyfriend, because she's lost him and Harry forever. For Draco, the locket is even worse. It shows him visions of his parents being tortured and killed by Voldemort. It whispers that it's all his fault, that he betrayed his family, his blood, his heritage. It shows him Hermione's dead body and tells him that he killed her, that everyone he cares about will die because of him, that he's weak and pathetic and worthless. The locket amplifies every bit of self-loathing Draco has ever felt, and there's a lot of it. He becomes withdrawn and depressed. He stops eating. He barely sleeps. And one day, Hermione finds him with his wand to his own throat, ready to end it all. She tackles him, wrestles the wand away, and holds him while he sobs. She makes him promise to never try that again. She reminds him of all the reasons he has to live. She tells him that she loves him, and that alone is enough reason to keep fighting. Slowly, Draco comes back from that dark edge, but it's a close thing. Harry watches all of this with complicated feelings. He sees how devoted Hermione and Draco are to each other. He sees how Hermione has saved Draco's life multiple times, not just physically, but emotionally. He sees that what they have is real, and he starts to accept it. Not fully, not without reservations, but he's trying. The three of them without Ron become a tight unit. They learn to work together. Draco's knowledge of dark magic proves invaluable. He recognizes protections and curses that Harry and Hermione don't. He knows how Death Eaters think and operate. He saves their lives more than once with his insider knowledge, and slowly Harry starts to trust him. Not completely, but enough. They destroy the locket. They find the cup. They infiltrate Gringotts. And through it all, Draco proves himself over and over again. He's not the coward Hermione once thought he was. He's brave when it matters. He's willing to sacrifice himself for others. He's become a true member of the team. But the biggest test comes when they return to Hogwarts for the final battle. Draco comes face to face with his mother. Narcissa Malfoy has been searching for her son for months. She's been desperate to find him, to bring him home, to protect him from Voldemort's wrath. When she sees Draco at Hogwarts fighting alongside Harry Potter, she's devastated. "My son," she cries, "what have they done to you? What have they turned you into?" Draco's heart breaks, because despite everything, he still loves his mother. She's not evil like his aunt. She's just a woman trying to protect her family. A woman who was raised with the same prejudices Draco was raised with. "Mother, please," Draco says. "You have to understand. I'm not fighting for them. I'm fighting for what's right. Voldemort is evil. He's going to destroy everything if we don't stop him." Narcissa shakes her head. "You've been poisoned by that mudblood girl. She's twisted your mind. Come home, Draco. Come back to us before it's too late." But Draco doesn't go. He stands his ground. He chooses Hermione and Harry and the side of good over his family. And Narcissa, faced with losing her son forever, makes a choice too. She stuns a nearby Death Eater and tells Draco to run. She chooses her son over Voldemort. It's a small moment, but it matters. It shows that love can break through even the deepest indoctrination. The Battle of Hogwarts is hell. People are dying everywhere. Fred Weasley still dies, and when Ron finds out, he breaks down completely. For a moment, he forgets his anger at Hermione. They hold each other and cry for their lost friend. It's the first real moment of connection they've had in months. Draco fights like a man possessed. He's dueling Death Eaters he's known his entire life. People who came to his childhood birthday parties. People his parents called friends. He's casting spells to protect Muggle-borns and half-bloods and blood traitors. He's everything his father raised him not to be. And he's proud of it. When Harry goes into the forest to die, Hermione wants to stop him. But she can't. She understands why he has to go. She holds him and tells him he's the bravest person she's ever known. And then she watches him walk away to meet Voldemort. She stands with Draco, and they wait. When Hagrid emerges from the forest carrying what appears to be Harry's body, Hermione's scream of anguish echoes across the grounds. Draco holds her up because her legs have given out. They think they've lost. They think Voldemort has won. But then Harry reveals he's alive, and the final battle begins. Draco and Hermione fight side by side. They're a perfect team, anticipating each other's moves, protecting each other's backs. When Bellatrix corners Hermione, it's Draco who saves her. He duels his aunt with everything he has, and when she's about to cast the killing curse at Hermione, Draco hits her with a stunning spell that gives Molly Weasley the opening she needs. In this timeline, Draco has a hand in Bellatrix's defeat. He's atoned, at least partially, for letting her into Hogwarts all those months ago. When Voldemort finally falls, when Harry's spell connects with his and the Dark Lord is destroyed forever, the relief is overwhelming. The war is over. They've won. But the cost has been terrible. So many dead. So many families torn apart. The wizarding world is in ruins. And in the aftermath, there's a reckoning. The Ministry wants to try Draco for his crimes. He let Death Eaters into Hogwarts. People died because of his actions. The fact that he changed sides doesn't erase what he did. Hermione is terrified they're going to send him to Azkaban. That after everything they've been through, she's going to lose him. But Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the chosen one, speaks at Draco's trial. He testifies about how Draco changed sides, how he fought against the Death Eaters, how he protected Hermione and helped hunt Horcruxes, how he fought in the Battle of Hogwarts and helped bring down Voldemort. Harry's testimony, combined with similar statements from Hermione and even Ron, who grudgingly admits that Draco fought well in the battle, sways the Wizengamot. Draco is sentenced to probation and community service instead of Azkaban. He has to help rebuild the wizarding world. He has to work with Muggleborns and Half-Bloods to repair the damage the war caused. It's a fitting sentence, really. He has to build up what he helped tear down. The years after the war are about healing, about rebuilding, about learning to live in a world without constant fear. Hermione and Draco stay together, though it's not easy. There are people who hate Draco for what he was, people who will never forgive him, people who spit at him in the street and call him a Death Eater. And there are people who hate Hermione for being with him, who call her a blood traitor and say she's betrayed her own kind. But they face it together. They build a life together, despite the prejudice and the pain. Now let's dive deeper into what this relationship really means for the wizarding world and explore the profound implications of their love story. The reconstruction of wizarding society after the war would be fundamentally different with Hermione and Draco at the center of the conversation. Think about what they represent together. Hermione, the Muggle-born war hero who fought beside Harry Potter from the very beginning. Draco, the reformed Death Eater who turned against everything he was raised to believe. Their relationship is a living, breathing symbol of the possibility of change and reconciliation. In the immediate aftermath of the war, the wizarding world is fractured. There are those who want revenge against all Death Eaters, who want to see them all locked up in Azkaban, regardless of whether they fought in the final battle or showed remorse. There are those who want to simply move on and pretend the war never happened, to return to the way things were before Voldemort. And then there are those like Hermione and Draco who want real, systemic change, who want to address the root causes of the war, the prejudices and inequalities that allowed someone like Voldemort to rise to power in the first place. Hermione throws herself into advocacy work immediately. She's not content to rest on her laurels as a war hero. She wants to use her platform and her influence to make lasting change. She starts with the House Elves, just like she always planned. But now she has the credibility and the political capital to actually make a difference. She works with members of the Wizengamot to pass legislation granting House Elves rights and wages if they choose to work. It's a hard-fought battle. Many pureblood families resist, arguing that this is an attack on traditional wizarding ways. But Hermione is relentless. She presents evidence, she makes speeches, she writes articles for the Daily Prophet. And slowly, public opinion begins to shift. Draco supports her work, though his support is complicated by his family history. The Malfoys owned House Elves for generations. Draco grew up being served by them without ever questioning whether that was right. Now he has to confront that legacy. He reaches out to the House Elves who used to serve his family and offers them wages, freedom, and an apology. Some accept. Others are so bound by tradition and conditioning that they don't know how to accept freedom. It's heartbreaking to watch, but it reinforces why this work is so important. Next, Hermione turns her attention to werewolf rights. She thinks of Remus Lupin, who showed her kindness and believed in Draco when few others did, and who died in the Battle of Hogwarts. She thinks of how he struggled to find work, to be accepted, to live a normal life simply because of a condition he couldn't control. She drafts legislation that would make it illegal to discriminate against werewolves in employment, housing, and education. She fights to ensure that the Wolfsbane potion is provided free of charge to all werewolves who need it. Again, there's resistance. People fear werewolves. They've been taught to see them as monsters. But Hermione doesn't back down. She brings in werewolves to testify about their experiences. She presents data showing that properly medicated werewolves pose no threat to society. She argues passionately that fear and prejudice are what create monsters, not the condition itself. And once again, slowly, she begins to win people over. Draco's role in all of this is more complex. He can't be the public face of these movements the way Hermione can. He's too controversial, too recently a Death Eater, but he works behind the scenes. He uses his knowledge of pureblood society, his understanding of how the old families think and operate, to help Hermione craft arguments that will resonate with them. He reaches out to former Slytherins, to people who grew up in the same world he did, and he talks to them about why change is necessary. He shares his own journey, his own transformation, and he asks them to consider whether the beliefs they were raised with are really serving anyone. Some listen. Some don't. There are plenty of people who see Draco as a traitor, who spit at his feet and refuse to even speak to him. But there are also those who are moved by his story, who see in him the possibility of their own redemption or transformation. Slowly, a network of reformist purebloods begins to form. People who recognize that the old ways led to war and destruction, and who want to be part of building something better. One of the most significant changes Hermione and Draco push for is in magical education. They argue that Hogwarts needs to change, that the way students are sorted into houses at age 11 perpetuates division and tribalism. They don't suggest abolishing houses entirely, there's too much tradition and history there, but they do advocate for reforms, inter-house cooperation projects, required classes on magical history that include the contributions of Muggleborns and the harm caused by blood purity ideology, ethics classes that teach students to think critically about the society they're inheriting. Headmistress McGonagall is initially skeptical. She's protective of Hogwarts and its traditions, but she's also seen firsthand how house rivalries and prejudices can poison young minds. She agrees to pilot some of Hermione and Draco's proposed programs. The results are encouraging. Students who participate in inter-house projects report feeling more connected to students from other houses. Classes on magical history that include diverse perspectives lead to more nuanced discussions about wizarding society. Ethics classes help students develop their own moral compasses rather than simply accepting what they've been told. It's not a perfect solution. There are still problems. Some Slytherin students come from families that actively resist these changes and teach their children to reject them. Some Gryffindors are so traumatized by the war that they can't see past the house divisions. But it's a start. It's progress. And that matters. Let's talk more specifically about how Hermione and Draco's relationship evolves in the years after the war. The initial period is the hardest. They're both dealing with trauma. Hermione has nightmares about the battle, about watching people die, about the moment she thought she'd lost Harry in the forest. She wakes up gasping, convinced she's back at Malfoy Manor being tortured by Bellatrix, even though in this timeline that never happened to her. The fear is still there, buried deep in her psyche. Draco's trauma is different but equally profound. He has survivor's guilt. He struggles with the knowledge that he let Death Eaters into Hogwarts, that people died because of his actions, that he can never fully atone for what he's done. He has panic attacks when he sees his dark mark, even though it's faded to almost nothing. He flinches when people touch his left arm. He can't go into certain parts of Hogwarts without being flooded with memories of that terrible night. They help each other through it. Hermione holds Draco when he has panic attacks, talks him through breathing exercises, reminds him that he's not that person anymore. Draco stays up with Hermione after her nightmares, makes her tea, distracts her with stories or debates until she can calm down enough to sleep. They go to therapy, both individually and together. It's hard work. Healing always is. But they're committed to doing it. To building a healthy relationship, despite the trauma they're both carrying. One of the biggest challenges they face is navigating their different relationships with their families. Hermione's parents are loving and supportive, once she restores their memories and explains everything that happened. They're wary of Draco at first, of course. They've heard about the terrible things he said and did. But they're also fundamentally good people who believe in second chances. They invite Draco to dinner. They ask him questions about his life, his beliefs, his plans for the future. They watch how he treats their daughter, how he looks at her, how he supports her work. Over time, they come to accept him. They see that he genuinely loves Hermione, that he's working hard to be better, that he's not the boy he used to be. Mrs. Granger tells Hermione one day that she's proud of her for giving Draco a chance. for seeing past his mistakes to the person he could become. It's one of the most validating moments of Hermione's life, having her mother's approval for this relationship that so many people condemn. Draco's family situation is far more complicated. His father, Lucius, never speaks to him again. He dies in Azkaban a few years after the war, broken and bitter. Draco tries to visit him once, hoping for some kind of reconciliation or closure, but Lucius refuses to see him. It's painful, but Draco comes to accept it. He can't change his father's mind, and he can't let his father's hatred control his life. His mother is a different story. Narcissa is torn between her love for her son and her loyalty to her husband and the beliefs she was raised with. She doesn't approve of Hermione. She doesn't approve of Draco's choices, but she also can't bear to lose her only child. So she makes a tenuous peace with the situation. She sends Draco letters occasionally, careful not to mention Hermione. She never invites them to Malfoy Manor, but she agrees to meet Draco alone in Diagon Alley once every few months. These meetings are strained and awkward. They talk about safe topics, the weather, the restoration of the manor, neutral news. They avoid discussing politics or the war or Hermione or anything meaningful. It's not a real relationship, but it's something. Draco wishes it could be more. He wishes his mother could accept Hermione, could be part of his life fully. But he understands why she can't or won't, and he's grateful for what little connection they have. Eventually, Hermione suggests that maybe the three of them could meet. Draco is terrified of the idea. He's sure it will be a disaster. But Hermione insists that they have to try, that this coldness between Draco and his mother isn't healthy for anyone. So they arrange a meeting at a neutral location, a quiet tea room in Diagon Alley. The meeting is every bit as awkward as Draco feared. Narcissa is icily polite to Hermione, refusing to use her name and referring to her only as Miss Granger. Hermione is equally formal, calling Narcissa Mrs. Malfoy and keeping her responses brief and courteous. Draco sits between them, miserable, wishing he could just disappear. But then something unexpected happens. They start talking about Draco, about how much he's changed, about how hard he's working to make amends, about how proud they both are of the man he's becoming. It's not much. It's not a breakthrough, but it's a tiny crack in the wall between them. And over the years, that crack slowly widens. Narcissa never fully accepts Hermione. She never calls her by her first name. She never invites her to family events, because there are no family events anymore, just occasional meetings. But she stops being actively hostile. She asks polite questions about Hermione's work. She acknowledges in her own reserved way that Hermione makes Draco happy. It's not the relationship any of them wanted, but it's better than nothing. Let's talk about Hermione's relationship with Ron in the years after the war, because this is one of the most painful aspects of this alternate timeline. Ron's heartbreak over Hermione choosing Draco is profound and lasting. For a long time, he can't even be in the same room with her. When the trio has to meet for order business or ministry functions, Ron finds excuses to leave early or not attend at all. When he does have to see Hermione, he's coldly polite at best, openly hostile at worst. Harry tries to mediate between them, to rebuild the bridges that have been burned. He talks to Ron about forgiveness, about how Hermione's happiness should matter more than Ron's hurt feelings. He talks to Hermione about giving Ron space and time to heal. But it's hard. The Golden Trio, the three friends who faced Voldemort together, who were supposed to be bonded for life, has been fractured, and the break might be permanent. It takes years for Ron and Hermione to find their way back to any kind of friendship. The turning point comes at George's wedding. Ron is the best man, and Hermione is invited because she's family, because the Weasleys still love her even if Ron doesn't. Draco stays away, understanding that his presence would be too much. During the reception, Ron has too much to drink. He finds Hermione standing alone outside, getting some air, and he approaches her. "I don't understand," he says, his words slightly slurred. "I've loved you since we were kids. I would have done anything for you. Why wasn't I enough?" Hermione's heart breaks all over again. "Ron," she says gently, "it's not that you weren't enough. You're wonderful. You're brave and loyal and funny and kind. Any woman would be lucky to have you. But I didn't choose Draco over you because you weren't good enough. I chose him because my heart went in that direction. It's not logical. It's not fair. It just is." Ron is quiet for a long moment. "Do you love him?" he finally asks. "More than you ever loved me." Hermione considers lying, sparing his feelings. But she owes him honesty. Yes, she says softly. I'm sorry, Ron, I do. I love him in a way I never loved you. That doesn't mean what we had wasn't real or important. But what I have with Draco is different. It's deeper. It's what I need. Ron nods slowly, tears streaming down his face. I wish I could hate you for it, he says. But I can't. I just miss my friend. I miss you, Hermione. I miss us, the trio. Hermione is crying too now. I miss you too, she says. I miss you so much. Can we try? Can we try to be friends again? Even if it's not the same as it was. It's not an instant fix. They don't fall back into their old friendship that night. But it's a beginning. Over the following years, Ron and Hermione slowly rebuild their relationship. They have coffee occasionally. They talk about their work, their lives, carefully avoiding topics that are too painful. Ron meets someone eventually, a woman named Eleanor, who works at the ministry. He falls in love with her, and that helps him let go of his resentment toward Hermione. By the time Hermione and Draco get married, Ron is able to attend the ceremony. He doesn't stand up front. He's not part of the wedding party. But he's there, in the third row, and when Hermione walks down the aisle, he's smiling. It's a sad smile, tinged with regret for what might have been. But it's genuine. He's happy for her, or at least he's working on being happy for her, and that's enough. Harry's relationship with both Hermione and Draco is also complicated in this timeline. Harry loves Hermione like a sister. She's been his closest friend, his most trusted advisor, his constant support through everything. When she fell for Draco, Harry felt betrayed and confused. He couldn't understand how she could love someone who had been so cruel to them for so long. But Harry is also fundamentally a good person who believes in redemption. He's seen too much death and destruction to hold on to hatred forever. Harry's acceptance of Draco is gradual. It starts during the Horcrux hunt, when Draco proves his loyalty over and over again. It continues through the Battle of Hogwarts, when Harry sees Draco fighting Death Eaters with everything he has. And it's cemented when Draco speaks at Harry's wedding to Ginny. Draco asks Harry if he can say a few words during the reception. Harry is surprised but agrees. Draco stands up in front of all the guests, many of whom still view him with suspicion and contempt, and he speaks from the heart. He talks about how Harry saved the wizarding world, how Harry showed him what real courage looks like, how Harry was willing to give him a second chance when he didn't deserve one. He talks about how Harry is the best man he knows, and how honored he is to call him a friend. There's not a dry eye in the room when he's finished. Even Ron, who still struggles with Draco's presence in their lives, has to admit that the speech was moving and sincere. After that, Harry and Draco's friendship becomes something real. They're not best friends. They'll never have the bond that Harry has with Ron or Hermione. But they're friends. They get drinks occasionally. They talk about Quidditch and work and their complicated relationships with fame. They support each other through the challenges of post-war life. When Harry and Ginny have their first child, they ask Hermione to be the godmother. And in a move that surprises everyone, they ask Draco to be the godfather. It's a controversial choice. Some members of the Weasley family object. But Harry is firm. Draco has proven himself. He's family now. And that's the end of the discussion. Now let's explore what happens when Hermione and Draco decide to get married. The engagement alone is controversial. When they announce it in the Daily Prophet, the response is explosive. Some people are supportive, seeing their marriage as a symbol of healing and reconciliation. But many others are outraged. There are editorials condemning Hermione for betraying her own kind. There are letters to the editor calling Draco a Death Eater who doesn't deserve happiness. There are even threats of violence against both of them. The ministry offers them security, but they decline. They won't live in fear. They won't let hatred dictate their choices. But they do take precautions. They keep their wedding plans private. They don't announce the location or date publicly. They invite only close friends and family, people they trust absolutely. The wedding itself is small and intimate. It takes place in a garden that Hermione has spent months cultivating with magic, filled with flowers from both the magical and muggle worlds. It's a perfect blend of their two backgrounds, just like their relationship. Luna Lovegood officiates because of course she does. Luna has been one of their most vocal supporters from the beginning. She never questioned their relationship, never saw anything strange about it. To Luna, love is love, and that's all that matters. Harry stands up for Hermione. It took some convincing. He struggled with the symbolism of supporting a Malfoy marriage, but in the end his love for Hermione won out. Hermione's parents are there, smiling through tears. Narcissa Malfoy sits alone in the back row, her face carefully neutral, but she's there. That alone is a miracle. When Draco and Hermione exchange vows, they speak about the journey they've been on, about how they started as enemies and somehow found their way to love, about how they've learned from each other, changed each other, made each other better, about how their love is a rebellion against everything that's tried to keep them apart. They speak about hope, about building a future that's different from the past, about proving that love really can conquer all. There's not a dry eye in the crowd. Even Ron, sitting with Eleanor, finds himself moved by their obvious devotion to each other. The reception is joyful and bittersweet. There's dancing and laughter and toasts. Fred's absence hangs over everything. He was supposed to be here, making inappropriate jokes and spiking the punch. But George does his best to carry on his twins' legacy, telling embarrassing stories about Hermione and making everyone laugh through their tears. The photo from their wedding appears in the Daily Prophet the next day. Hermione in a simple white dress, Draco in dress robes, both of them smiling like they can't believe their luck. The headline reads, "Former enemies wed in private ceremony." The article is surprisingly fair, acknowledging the controversy but also noting the symbolic importance of their union. The photo becomes iconic. Years later, it will hang in the Ministry of Magic as a reminder of the healing that followed the war. Now let's talk about their children in much greater depth, because this is where the real impact of their relationship becomes clear. When Hermione discovers she's pregnant with their first child, both she and Draco are terrified. They're bringing a child into a world that's still deeply divided. Their child will face prejudice and hatred from both sides, from purebloods who see the Malfoy line as tainted by Muggle blood, from Muggleborns who see any Malfoy as irredeemable, but they're also excited. This child will be a symbol of everything they've fought for, a living, breathing reminder that blood status doesn't matter, that love can bridge any divide, that the future doesn't have to repeat the past. They spend months debating names. Draco wants to use a family name to honor the Malfoy tradition. But all the traditional Malfoy names are tainted by association with Death Eaters. Hermione suggests they start a new tradition. Choose a name that belongs only to their child, not to the complicated history of either of their families. They finally settle on Scorpius Hyperion Malfoy. Scorpius because Draco wanted a constellation name, keeping that bit of Malfoy tradition. Hyperion because Hermione loved the Greek titan who was the father of the sun, moon, and dawn. A fitting name for a child who represents a new beginning. When Scorpius is born, he's perfect. He has Draco's pale blonde hair and Hermione's warm brown eyes. He's a physical representation of their two worlds coming together. Draco holds him for the first time and breaks down crying. He's overwhelmed by love for this tiny person, by fear for what challenges he'll face, by determination to be a better father than Lucius was to him. Hermione watches Draco with their son and falls in love with him all over again. This man who was raised to value blood purity above all else is cradling their half-blood child like he's the most precious thing in the world. This man who once called her mudblood is now the father of her child. The transformation is complete. Raising Scorpius is both joyful and challenging. He's a bright, curious child who asks endless questions about everything. He wants to know why some people don't like his mummy, why some kids at the park won't play with him, why his grandfather Lucius isn't in any of the family photos. Hermione and Draco answer his questions as honestly as they can, age-appropriately. They don't hide the truth from him. They tell him about the war, about the mistakes Draco made, about the prejudices that still exist in their world. But they also tell him about redemption, about change, about how people can grow and become better, about how love is stronger than hate. They tell him that some people will judge him unfairly because of his parents, and that's not right, but it's reality. They teach him to be proud of who he is, to stand up for what's right, to treat everyone with kindness regardless of their blood status or background. When Scorpius is 5, they have a daughter. They name her Lyra Rose Malfoy, Lyra for another constellation, keeping the Malfoy tradition alive. Rose because Hermione loved the simplicity and beauty of the name, and because roses have thorns, they're delicate but they can protect themselves. Lyra has Hermione's wild, curly hair and Draco's sharp aristocratic features. She's fierce and brilliant and stubborn. From the time she can talk, she's arguing with her parents about everything. She has Hermione's need to be right, and Draco's cunning approach to getting what she wants. She's going to be a force to be reckoned with. The Malfoy children grow up in a household filled with love and books and spirited debates. Hermione and Draco encourage them to question everything, to think critically, to form their own opinions. They take them to Muggle museums and magical historical sites. They teach them about both worlds, helping them appreciate their dual heritage. They also prepare them for the prejudice they'll face. Hermione and Draco role-play difficult situations with them. What do you do if someone calls your mom a mudblood? What do you say if someone says your dad is a Death Eater? How do you respond to hatred without becoming hateful yourself? It's heartbreaking that these conversations are necessary, but they are. When Scorpius goes to Hogwarts, Hermione and Draco are terrified. They know he'll face bullying. They know some kids will have been taught by their parents to hate him. They've done everything they can to prepare him, but they can't protect him from everything. The Sorting Hat considers Scorpius for a long time. It sees his mother's intelligence and love of learning. It sees his father's cunning and ambition. It sees his own unique qualities, his kindness, his curiosity, his determination to prove himself. In the end, it places him in Ravenclaw. It's perfect, really. Not Gryffindor like his mother, not Slytherin like his father, but something that's entirely his own. Hermione and Draco are proud. They've raised a child who isn't defined by their houses or their histories, but by his own merits. Scorpius thrives at Hogwarts. He makes friends across all houses, refusing to participate in house rivalries. He's brilliant in his classes, particularly in defense against the dark arts and transfiguration. He joins the dueling club and the Gobstones club. He's popular, not because of his family name, but because of who he is. Of course, he faces bullying too. There are students whose parents fought in the war, who lost family members, who can't separate Scorpius from his father's past. They call him names. They exclude him from study groups. They spread rumors about him. One day, Scorpius comes home for the holidays with a black eye. He got into a fight with a seventh-year Gryffindor who called Hermione a mudblood. Scorpius punched him. It's exactly what Hermione did to Draco in their third year, and the parallel is not lost on any of them. Draco is torn between being proud that his son stood up for his mother and being worried about him using violence. Hermione is furious that her son was put in that position, but also concerned that he resorted to physical force. They sit Scorpius down and have a long conversation about it. They tell him they understand why he did it, that they're glad he defended Hermione, but that violence isn't the answer. They talk about better ways to handle prejudice and hatred. They talk about how responding with violence just reinforces the stereotypes people have about the Malfoy family. They tell him he's better than that he can be the bigger person. Scorpius listens, but he's not entirely convinced. He thinks some things are worth fighting for. Some insults can't go unanswered. He's more like his parents than any of them realize. When Lyra goes to Hogwarts 2 years later, she's sorted into Slytherin. Draco is secretly pleased, though he tries to hide it. Hermione is worried, but she trusts that Lyra can handle it. And Lyra does more than handle it. She becomes a leader in Slytherin, challenging the old prejudices from within. She's vocal about her mother's Muggle-born heritage. She shuts down any blood purity talk immediately. She forms friendships with students from all backgrounds and houses. Lyra is fearless in a way that sometimes terrifies her parents. She starts a student organization called the New Alliance, dedicated to promoting unity across house and blood status lines. She organizes inter-house study sessions and social events. She writes opinion pieces for the Hogwarts paper about the importance of letting go of old prejudices. She's doing at 11 and 12 years old what Hermione has been doing in the Ministry for years. Like mother, like daughter. But Lyra faces even more intense bullying than Scorpius did. She's a girl, which makes her a target for certain kinds of gendered harassment. She's in Slytherin, which means she's dealing with prejudice from within her own house as well as from other houses. Some Slytherins see her as a traitor for being proud of her Muggle-born heritage. Some Gryffindors see her as a Malfoy and can't get past that. One night, someone leaves a note on her bed that says, "Your mudblood mother should have died in the war." Lyra doesn't tell her parents about it. She doesn't want to worry them. But Scorpius finds out and tells them. Hermione and Draco are horrified and furious. They want to go to the school to demand that the person responsible be found and punished. But Lyra stops them. "This is my fight," she tells them. "You've spent your whole lives proving that blood status doesn't matter. Now it's my turn. I can handle this." And she does. Lyra uses the incident to spark a larger conversation at Hogwarts about hatred and prejudice. She gives a speech in the Great Hall about how the war should have taught them all that blood purity is a lie. She talks about how her parents, two people who were supposed to be enemies, found love and built a family. She talks about how the next generation has a choice. They can repeat the mistakes of the past, or they can build something better. The speech goes viral in the wizarding world. It's reprinted in the Daily Prophet. It's discussed on wizarding wireless programs. Lyra Malfoy becomes a symbol of the new generation, of hope and change, and the possibility of moving beyond the prejudices that tore the wizarding world apart. Hermione and Draco are incredibly proud of both their children, but also worried. They know what it's like to be in the public eye, to be scrutinized and judged and attacked. They don't want that for their kids. But Scorpius and Lyra aren't giving them a choice. They're forging their own paths, making their own mark on the world. Let's talk about how Hermione and Draco's relationship affects the broader culture of the wizarding world over time. Their marriage and their children become a test case for whether the wizarding world can truly move past its prejudices. In the early years, the response is mixed at best. There are families who refuse to interact with them socially. There are organizations that won't invite Draco to speak or events because of his past. There are people who send hate mail regularly, but there are also people who are inspired by their story. Young couples who are facing similar prejudices, whether based on blood status or house affiliations or other divisions, look to Hermione and Draco as proof that love can overcome. Support groups form for mixed blood status relationships. Articles are written analyzing what made their relationship work and how others can follow their example. A generation of young people grows up seeing Hermione and Draco as a normal couple, not a controversial one. And that makes all the difference. By the time Scorpius and Lyra are teenagers, the wizarding world has changed significantly. It's not perfect, prejudices still exist, hatred hasn't disappeared, but it's better. There are more mixed blood status marriages. The term mudblood is considered more universally unacceptable. Using it can result in serious social and legal consequences. House elves have rights and wages. Werewolves face less discrimination. Hogwarts has reformed its curriculum to be more inclusive and less divisive. Hermione likes to think that she and Draco played a part in these changes, that their relationship, as controversial as it was, helped shift the culture, that their children, growing up proud of their mixed heritage, helped normalize something that was once considered taboo. But she knows it wasn't just them. It was everyone who fought in the war, everyone who chose love over hate, everyone who decided that the next generation deserved better than what came before. Draco sometimes wonders what his life would have been like if he'd never fallen in love with Hermione. If he'd gone through with Voldemort's plan, killed Dumbledore himself, fully committed to being a Death Eater, he'd probably be in Azkaban now, or dead. He certainly wouldn't have this beautiful life, this family he loves more than anything. He wouldn't have found redemption. He wouldn't have become someone he's proud to be. Every day, he's grateful for that night in the library when Hermione found him crying and chose to show him kindness. That was the moment everything changed. That was the moment his life split into two possible paths, and somehow he ended up on the right one. He's grateful for Hermione's patience as he unlearned years of prejudice and hatred. He's grateful for her belief in him when no one else, not even himself, thought he could change. Hermione, for her part, never regrets choosing Draco. Yes, it cost her. It damaged her friendship with Ron for years. It made her life more difficult in countless ways. It brought her hatred and threats and judgment. But it also brought her love. Real, deep, transformative love. It brought her Scorpius and Lyra. It brought her a partner who challenges her, supports her, makes her laugh, and makes her think. It brought her a life that's complicated and messy and real in a way that feels authentic. She sometimes thinks about what would have happened if she'd walked away that night in the library. If she'd left Draco to deal with his demons alone. He probably would have succeeded in his mission. Death Eaters would have infiltrated Hogwarts. Dumbledore would have died, maybe Harry too. Voldemort might have won the war. Or, if not won completely, the cost of defeating him would have been even higher. So maybe, in a way, falling in love with Draco Malfoy was one of the most important things she ever did. Not just for herself, but for the entire wizarding world. Now let's explore how other characters' lives are different in this timeline. Because the ripple effects of Hermione and Draco's relationship extend far beyond just them. Ron's life, as we've discussed, is profoundly altered. In the original timeline, he marries Hermione, and they have 2 children, Rose and Hugo. They work together at Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, and later Ron joins Harry at the Auror office before leaving to help George run the shop permanently. In this timeline, Ron's path is different. He never marries Hermione. He spends years working through his heartbreak and resentment. He throws himself into work, first as an Auror alongside Harry, then helping George with the shop. The work helps distract him from his pain, but it doesn't heal him. That healing comes slowly, through therapy and time, and eventually through meeting Eleanor. Eleanor Clearwater is a distant cousin of Penelope Clearwater, the Ravenclaw who used to date Percy. She works in the Department of Magical Transportation. She's smart and funny and kind, and she doesn't know much about the war or the famous trio. She just knows Ron as Ron, not as Harry Potter's best friend or the man whose heart was broken by Hermione Granger. They meet at a ministry function. Ron is there reluctantly, having been dragged along by Harry. Eleanor literally bumps into him, spilling her drink all over his robes. She's mortified and apologetic. Ron, to his own surprise, finds himself laughing. It's the first time he's genuinely laughed in months. They start talking. She makes him smile. And for the first time since Hermione chose Draco, Ron feels like maybe he could be happy again. Their relationship develops slowly. Ron is cautious, afraid of getting hurt again. But Eleanor is patient. She doesn't push him. She lets him open up in his own time. When he finally tells her about Hermione, about how much it hurt to lose her, Eleanor doesn't judge him for still having those feelings. She just holds his hand and tells him she's glad he's willing to try again. They get married 2 years after they meet. It's a big, joyful Weasley wedding with all the chaos and love that entails. Ron is happy, genuinely happy, in a way he wasn't sure he'd ever be again. He and Eleanor have 3 children, and he's a devoted father and husband. He never becomes best friends with Hermione again, not the way they were before. But they achieve a comfortable friendship. They can have conversations without awkwardness. They can attend the same events without tension. Ron even manages to be civil to Draco, though they'll never be close. It's not the relationship any of them expected, but it works. Harry's life is also affected, though less dramatically than Ron's. He still marries Ginny. They still have 3 children, James, Albus, and Lily. He still becomes an Auror and eventually head of the Magical Law Enforcement Office. But his friendships are different. In the original timeline, Harry, Ron, and Hermione remained a tight trio throughout their lives. In this timeline, there's always a slight awkwardness between the 3 of them. When they get together, there's an elephant in the room. They can't quite recapture the easy camaraderie they had as teenagers. Harry feels like he's always mediating, always trying to keep the peace between Ron and Hermione, always careful not to show favoritism to either side. It's exhausting, but Harry also gains a new friendship with Draco that he never would have had in the original timeline. They bond over their shared experience of the Horcrux hunt and the Battle of Hogwarts. They understand each other in ways that few other people can. They've both carried enormous burdens. They've both made mistakes they can never fully atone for. They both struggle with their pasts and their public personas. Their friendship is unexpected and somewhat controversial, but it's real. Ginny's life changes too. In the original timeline, Hermione is her sister-in-law and one of her closest friends. In this timeline, that relationship is complicated. Ginny is loyal to her brother, so she's hurt and angry on Ron's behalf. But she's also close with Hermione, and has been since Hermione helped her recover from the Chamber of Secrets trauma. Ginny finds herself torn between them. She tries to maintain friendships with both, but it's not easy. Family gatherings at the Burrow become awkward affairs. Ron often makes excuses not to come if Hermione will be there. Hermione feels guilty and sometimes skips events to make things easier. Ginny wishes things could go back to the way they were, but she knows that's impossible. Over time, Ginny comes to accept Hermione and Draco's relationship, especially after she sees how happy they are together and how well they're raising their children. She and Hermione rebuild their friendship slowly. They have tea together occasionally, just the 2 of them. They talk about their kids, their work, their lives. It's different than it was before, less easy and more careful. But it's something. Neville's relationship with the situation is perhaps the most complicated of all. Neville suffered more than almost anyone at the hands of Bellatrix Lestrange, Draco's aunt. His parents were tortured into insanity. They spent his entire childhood in St. Mungo's, unable to recognize him, lost in their own minds. That trauma never fully heals. When Hermione starts dating Draco, Neville feels betrayed. How can she be with someone whose family destroyed his family? How can she love someone whose aunt tortured his parents? He understands intellectually that Draco isn't responsible for Bellatrix's actions, but emotionally he can't separate the two. For years, Neville avoids Hermione. He can't look at her without feeling hurt and angry. He can't be around Draco without seeing Bellatrix's face, hearing her cruel laughter. It's not fair to either of them, but he can't help it. The turning point comes when Neville's mother has a rare moment of lucidity. These moments are few and far between, brief windows when Alice Longbottom is herself again. During one of these moments, Neville tells her about Hermione and Draco. He expects his mother to be as upset as he is, but instead, Alice surprises him. She takes his hand and tells him that hatred is a poison, that she doesn't want him to spend his life consumed by anger over what was done to her, that the war is over and the next generation deserves a chance to build something better, that if this boy has truly changed, if he fought against the Death Eaters, then he deserves a second chance. She tells Neville that she wants him to be happy, not bitter. Before she slips back into her fog, she makes him promise to try to let go of his anger. It's not easy. Neville tries, but old wounds don't heal overnight. Still, he makes an effort. He attends Hermione and Draco's wedding, sitting in the back, leaving early. But he's there. That's progress. Over the years, Neville and Hermione slowly rebuild their friendship. They'll never be as close as they were during the war, but they achieve a cordial relationship. Neville becomes herbology professor at Hogwarts, and he's fair to Scorpius and Lyra when they're his students, judging them on their own merits rather than their father's past. Let's talk about Luna, because her role in supporting Hermione and Draco is significant and often overlooked. Luna never questions their relationship. From the moment she learns about it, she simply accepts it. To Luna, love is magic, and magic is everywhere. And there's nothing strange about two people who were once enemies falling in love. In fact, she thinks it's rather beautiful. Luna becomes one of Hermione and Draco's closest friends. She's one of the few people who can spend time with both of them without any awkwardness or judgment. She officiates their wedding. She's the godmother to Lyra. She's a constant, steady presence in their lives. Luna's own life is interesting in this timeline. She still becomes a magizoologist, traveling the world in search of magical creatures. She still marries Rolf Scamander and has twin sons. But she also becomes a voice for acceptance and open-mindedness in the wizarding world. She writes articles for the Quibbler about letting go of old prejudices and embracing new possibilities. She uses her platform to normalize relationships like Hermione and Draco's. Some people dismiss her as Loony Luna, the weird girl who believes in impossible things. But others listen, because Luna has a way of cutting through the noise and getting to the heart of things. She sees the world differently, and sometimes that different perspective is exactly what's needed. Let's explore the long-term political implications of Hermione and Draco's relationship. Hermione's career trajectory is different in this timeline. In the original timeline, she becomes a high-ranking ministry official, eventually serving as Minister for Magic. She pushes through reforms and changes, but she does it largely within the established system. In this timeline, Hermione is more radical. Her relationship with Draco has made her more aware of how deeply rooted prejudice is in wizarding society. She's experienced firsthand the hatred and resistance to change. So she's less interested in working within the system and more interested in fundamentally transforming it. She starts by working in the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, pushing for rights for house elves, werewolves, centaurs, and other magical beings. But she quickly realizes that the department itself is part of the problem. Its very name implies that magical creatures need to be regulated and controlled, rather than treated as equals. So Hermione launches a campaign to abolish the department entirely and replace it with something new, a department for magical beings that operates on principles of equality and mutual respect rather than control. It's a controversial proposal. Many people think she's going too far, that she's too radical, that she's letting her personal life cloud her judgment. But Hermione is undeterred. She builds coalitions. She lobbies Wizengamot members. She does public speaking tours. And slowly, opinion begins to shift. It takes years, but eventually her proposal passes. The Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures is abolished and replaced with the Department for Magical Beings. It's a symbolic victory as much as a practical one. But symbols matter. Hermione doesn't stop there. She pushes for changes to the way Hogwarts operates, advocating for more inter-house cooperation and less emphasis on house rivalries. She fights for reforms to the justice system, arguing for rehabilitation and restorative justice rather than purely punitive measures. She works to change inheritance laws that favor purebloods. She's everywhere, constantly fighting for change, and she's relentless. Draco supports her work, but his role is more behind the scenes. He can't be the public face of these movements. He's too controversial. But he uses his connections, his knowledge of how pure blood society works, his family's remaining wealth and influence to support Hermione's causes. He makes donations. He has private conversations with influential people. He writes op-eds under a pseudonym. Together, they're a formidable political team. Some people accuse Hermione of being too influenced by her husband, of pushing a Malfoy agenda under the guise of reform. These accusations are baseless and sexist, suggesting that Hermione isn't capable of forming her own opinions. But they persist nonetheless. Hermione addresses them head-on, making it clear that these are her ideas, her initiatives, and that Draco supports her, not the other way around. Eventually, there's talk of Hermione running for Minister for Magic. She has the credentials, the experience, the public profile. But she's also incredibly divisive. A significant portion of the wizarding population loves her, sees her as a hero and a reformer. An equally significant portion hates her, sees her as too radical, too willing to overturn tradition. Hermione agonizes over whether to run. She talks to Harry, who encourages her. She talks to Ron, who's skeptical but tells her to do what she thinks is right. She talks to Draco, who's worried about the toll it will take on their family but supports whatever she decides. In the end, Hermione decides not to run, not because she doesn't think she'd be good at it, but because she realizes she can accomplish more as an activist and advocate than she could as minister. As minister, she'd have to compromise, to work within the system, to make deals with people whose values she opposes. As an independent voice, she can be more radical, more uncompromising, more effective. It's a controversial decision. Some people admire her for it. Others see it as cowardice, as running away from responsibility. But Hermione knows it's the right choice for her. She continues her advocacy work, and over the decades she helps transform wizarding society in profound ways. By the time she's in her 50s, the wizarding world barely resembles what it was when she was a student at Hogwarts. And she's proud of that. Now let's imagine Hermione and Draco in their later years as grandparents, looking back on their lives and the impact they've had. Scorpius grows up to become a curse breaker for Gringotts, traveling the world and having adventures much like his parents did during the Horcrux hunt. He marries a half-blood witch named Astoria, and yes, they name their first daughter Rose, in honor of the friendship between Hermione and Ron that was fractured but never fully broken. Lyra becomes a professor at Hogwarts, teaching defense against the dark arts. She's fierce and demanding and beloved by her students. She marries a Muggle-born wizard, continuing the family tradition of crossing blood status lines. They have twin boys who are absolutely wild and keep everyone on their toes. Hermione and Draco are doting grandparents. They spoil the grandchildren terribly, taking them on trips and buying them presents and telling them stories about the war. The grandchildren are fascinated by their grandparents' history. They can't imagine their gentle grandmother punching their grandfather in the face. They can't picture their grandfather as a Death Eater. The past seems like a foreign country to them, which is exactly what Hermione and Draco hoped for. On quiet evenings, Hermione and Draco sit together in their garden, watching the sunset, holding hands like they've been doing for decades. They talk about their lives, about all the battles they've fought, about all the progress they've seen. They talk about the friends they've lost and the relationships that have endured. They talk about their children and grandchildren, about the world they're inheriting. Sometimes Draco asks Hermione if she has any regrets, if she wishes she'd chosen differently, made things easier for herself. And Hermione always says no. She regrets the pain their relationship caused others, particularly Ron. She wishes that could have been different. But she doesn't regret choosing Draco. She doesn't regret the life they've built together. Draco asks her why, and Hermione tells him it's because he made her better. He challenged her assumptions, forced her to examine her own prejudices, taught her about the complexity of morality and redemption. He gave her Scorpius and Lyra, the two best things in her life aside from him. He stood beside her through every fight, every battle, every challenge. How could she regret that? And what about you? Hermione asks. Do you ever wish you'd chosen differently? Wished you'd stayed on Voldemort's side, maintained your family's approval, lived the life you were raised to live? Draco laughs at that. Every day, he tells her. Every single day I'm grateful I fell in love with you. You saved my life, Hermione. Not just that night in the bathroom, though you did that too, but you saved me from becoming a monster. You showed me there was another way to live. You gave me a reason to be better. If I'd stayed on Voldemort's side, I'd be dead or in Azkaban. At best, I'd be a broken man living with the weight of terrible crimes. Instead, I'm here, with you, with our family, having lived a life I'm proud of. How could I possibly regret that? They sit in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the last rays of sunlight fade from the sky. Then Hermione speaks again. Do you think we made a difference? Do you think the wizarding world is really better because of us? Draco considers the question carefully. I think we were part of something bigger, he finally says. We weren't the only ones fighting for change. Harry was there. Luna was there. So many others. But yes, I think we made a difference. I think our relationship showed people that change is possible, that enemies can become lovers, that the next generation doesn't have to fight the same battles we did. Look at our grandchildren. They don't see blood status the way our generation did. They don't understand why it ever mattered. That's progress. That's what we fought for. Hermione nods, satisfied. She squeezes Draco's hand, and he squeezes back. They've been through so much together. War and peace, hatred and love, tragedy and triumph. And through it all, they've had each other. As they sit there in the gathering darkness, they hear laughter from inside the house. Their grandchildren are visiting, and the house is full of noise and chaos and joy. Draco stands and offers Hermione his hand. Come on, he says. Let's go see what trouble they're getting into. Hermione takes his hand and lets him pull her to her feet. They walk toward the house together, toward their family, toward the life they've built from the ashes of war and the ruins of old prejudices. And in that moment, everything feels right. All the struggles, all the pain, all the battles, it was all worth it, because they created something beautiful. Not just their family, but a new vision of what the wizarding world could be. A world where love matters more than blood, where redemption is possible, where the sins of the parents don't doom the children, where enemies can become family. That's the legacy of Hermione Granger and Draco Malfoy. Not just their political reforms or their advocacy work, important as those were, but the simple revolutionary act of falling in love across enemy lines and refusing to let hatred win. They proved that love really is the most powerful magic, that it can transform individuals, relationships, communities, entire societies, that it's worth fighting for, even when everyone says it's impossible, even when the cost is high, even when the odds are against you. So what if Hermione Granger and Draco Malfoy fell in love? The wizarding world would be fundamentally transformed. Not overnight, not easily, but gradually, persistently, courageously, it would become something better. A world where a child with a Muggle-born mother and a former Death Eater father can grow up proud of both sides of their heritage. Where blood status is a relic of the past. Where redemption is possible for those who truly seek it. Where love conquers all. And maybe that's the real magic of this story. Not the spells or the potions or the battles, but the idea that people can change. That love can bridge any divide. That the future doesn't have to repeat the past. That's powerful magic indeed. That's the kind of magic that really can change the world. So whether you ship Hermione and Draco or not, whether you think their relationship makes sense or not, one thing is undeniable. Their story, this alternate timeline where they fall in love, is a story about hope, about the possibility of redemption and transformation and building something better from the ruins of what came before. And in a world that often feels dark and divided, that's a story worth telling. That's a story worth believing in. Because if Hermione Granger and Draco Malfoy can find love in the midst of war, if they can build a life together despite everything that separates them, if they can help transform a society built on prejudice and hatred into something more inclusive and just, then anything is possible. Any divide can be bridged. Any enemy can become a friend. Any darkness can be overcome by light. That's the true magic of their story. That's why it resonates with so many people. That's why this alternate timeline, this what-if scenario, is worth exploring in such depth. Because it reminds us that we always have a choice. We can choose hatred or love. We can choose division or unity. We can choose to repeat the mistakes of the past, or to build something better for the future. Hermione and Draco chose love. They chose unity. They chose the future. And in doing so, they changed everything.